I am blessed to be joined by the one and only Sammy Stacks because I know literally nothing about this incoming rookie class outside of Jeremiah Love, and he needs to explain it to me. He actually did my first set of 2026 Dynasty rookie rankings on the site because the developers needed some to test around the rookies page with. And yeah, felt like there's nobody better to explain this year's rookie class to me, to you, and then obviously, don't worry, I will update my rankings on the site as soon as I know enough. But until then, we got Sammy to give us a rundown.
Yeah, really happy to be here. Thanks for having me on, and I'm excited to talk about these rookies.
Well, brother, let's start it off with the one and only Jeremiah Love. So I was just doing a little bit of research looking at the domain bakery on the site. They have him in the same tier prospect wise as like Bijan, Gurley, Genty, Barkley, Gibbs, Zeke, CMC. And then going over and looking at the land draft guide, Zach has him up there with like Brees Hall, Aaron Jones coming out in terms of playing style wise on film. Where do you kind of see him? Do you see him as that like set it and forget it? You know he's going to be an elite RB1 that you can build your dynasty team around, or is he more so like around the Brees range or Aaron Jones?
I think he's the former. I think that he's absolutely going to be a top five dynasty running back the second he enters the NFL. Really, he will, without a doubt, be the 101 in 2026 rookie drafts. And two of the last three classes that we've had have had a top 10 drafted running back. We had Bijan in 2023, Genty in 2025, and Jeremiah Love is going to continue that trend. He is 6 foot tall, 214 pounds. He's super, super young as a prospect. He's not even going to be 21 on draft night. Ran for 1,300 yards in 2025, just under 7 yards per carry in back to back seasons. And he has absolutely everything you could want from a running back prospect: explosiveness, tackle breaking ability. The contact balance is really, really good. He has the long speed. He wasn't used as much of as a receiver as you would like in 2025, but I think that he without a doubt has the skill set to do that in the NFL. His receiving role will be however big the team that drafts him wants it to be. And speaking of that, I think he will without a doubt be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft, specifically because this draft isn't really being talked about as one with a ton of blue chip talent at the top of it. And so positional value in those cases kind of goes out the window. And the Titans, as early as 4 overall, is where I would start talking about Jeremiah Love going. There's the Commanders at 7, the Saints at 8, the Chiefs at 9 is a big talking point for Jeremiah Love. I think that he absolutely fits into the Ashton Genty, Bijan Robinson profile that we've seen over the past 2-3 years of a guy who's going to come into the NFL and immediately be relevant for fantasy football.
So if he's undoubtedly the 101 at the moment and you have Ashton Genty, would you be willing to reset and send Genty for the 101?
At this point, I would, because I believe that the Jeremiah Love landing spot will be better than what Ashton Genty is dealing with. There's a lot of betting that needs to be done on the Raiders at this point, and I think that Jeremiah Love has the opportunity to come into a situation that is way, way better, and at worst, probably as bad as the Raiders, if that makes sense.
If you were a rebuilder, right? Like you're saying, hey, I'm not going to contend until 2027 at the earliest. Obviously, you'd be asking for more at first. But if you send out the offer of Bijan or Gibbs for the 101 and that owner came back saying like, hey, I'm not throwing in a future first on top of that, it's either the 101 or Bijan, who would you rather have in that instance if you know for sure you're not contending in 2026?
I think in that case, I would keep Bijan and Gibbs over Jeremiah Love. There's just more solidity to those assets. There's way less risk that you're taking on knowing that they've produced already. But I absolutely believe that if Jeremiah Love gets a favorable landing spot like the Chiefs, would put him directly into that conversation like you're proposing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I am always one, whether it was Genty last year, Barkley 2018, Zeke 2016. If you're like a true generational type running back, that you're like a top 5, top 10 pick, you are so insulated in dynasty value to the downside, even if you flop in the most extreme example your rookie season, like Genty, that if he is this good and like he checks every single box throughout the process and he goes top 5, I mean, hell, I'm going to be quick to put him in S tier in my running back rankings. But yeah, let's go down to our next tier, starting off with Jordan Tyson. It is interesting you going with like a skill positional guy here rather than a quarterback if we think the quarterbacks are going to go off the board at the top of the NFL draft. So, like, what makes him compelling enough to skip over like a QB that goes one overall?
So I think that this is honestly a personal preference thing more than anything else. And this is just more how I look at the quarterback position in Dynasty compared to other people. I'm not one to just prop it up because they are quarterbacks. I want the difference makers. And my personal opinion is that the two guys who we will talk about very soon are not difference makers in terms of scoring fantasy points in the NFL. And for our purposes, that is what we want. And so Jordan Tyson, wide receiver out of Arizona State, he is, in my opinion, probably the most talented wide receiver in this NFL draft. He will be very, very young on draft night, similar to Jeremiah Love, less than 22 years old. He's 6'2, 200 pounds. The conversation that you will hear the most about Jordan Tyson is that he is the most talented wide receiver in this draft class, but he may not be the first one drafted, and that's because of his lengthy injury history. He tore his ACL in 2022, wiped out his entire 2023 season. He injured his collarbone at the end of 2024, missed Arizona State's playoff run last year. And this year he dealt with a hamstring injury, which caused him to miss over a month. So it is obviously a concern. However, we could get to the combine and he gets cleared by NFL teams, and then nobody even talks about this. And he's drafted in the top 10. There are also draft talking heads who are saying that he could slide to the back end of round one. Now, obviously, right now, we don't know what's going to happen with that. He is just such an explosive player. He's incredible against man coverage. He's a very, very good separator, great in contested catch situations as well. And I think that talent wise, he should be a top 10 pick. And we just have to see how the medicals go.
Yeah, looking at the domain database here with the bakery, their closest comps score wise for prospects were Olave, JMO, Hollywood, Brian Thomas, Rome, Judy, Tedero McMillan, Calvin Ridley. So they have him ahead of Tedero McMillan, who's the wide receiver one last year. And then going over and looking at what Zach has for, I'm assuming Zach's more based on film here, correct?
Yes.
Zach has him around Greg Jennings, Amari Cooper as the ceiling, and his floor being Michael Wilson. Which, if that's the case, after Michael Wilson, see, that's a pretty damn good floor to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen as lofty comps as CD Lamb. Some people are really, really high on this guy, and I think that there are some. I think that he is the type of guy who you get to the line of scrimmage, it's third down. That's the guy you're going to every time. He gets off the ball so fast. He will be a wide receiver one at the NFL level if all checks out with the medicals. I have no doubt about that. And I think that there are some awesome landing spots at the top of this draft as well. Imagine Jordan Tyson as Jaden Daniels, wide receiver one for the future. I think that he could do really well in the Saints offense with Kellen Moore and Tyler Shuck. So a lot will happen over the next few months talking about Jordan Tyson. And the next wide receiver, if we can transition there, Carnell Tate, who I also have in this tier, wide receiver out of Ohio State. We yet again have another Ohio State wide receiver entering the NFL, 6'3", 195 pounds. He's another young prospect, 21.3 years old on draft night. And I think you can touch on what the bakery says about him.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm looking at the domains bakery, which I'm assuming is more analytics based, right? And that actually has Carnell Tate as the fourth wide receiver in this class. Whereas going over and looking at the land stuff, which I'm assuming again is more film related, they have him as the number one wide receiver in the class. So is this an instance in which like the numbers don't necessarily pop and instead it's more like, hey, you got to take into context he played at Ohio State and look at the film?
That's sort of exactly what it is. I mean,
Okay.
his entire career, he's had incredible wide receivers ahead of him, obviously. Marv was drafted 2 years ago, Egbuka last year, and Jeremiah Smith will be a top 5 pick in 2027.
Yeah.
And so Carnell Tate has just been a victim of playing behind those guys and didn't really do that much until 2025. But he had a breakout season. Biggest thing with Carnell Tate, he just catches everything. Not a single drop in 2025. Mason, 75% on his contested targets he catches. That is 100th percentile. It's the best in college football. He's like a true prototypical X wide receiver, profiles as a wide receiver one on an NFL team. And I think this one is kind of just keep it simple, stupid, draft the Ohio State wide receiver.
So one last question with these guys before we move on. If you could take Igbuka, if you could take Tedero McMillan, if you could take the rookie wide receivers from last year's class and hit the reset button and send them over for Tate or Tyson, would you do that?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think I would. I would send Igbuka or Tedero McMillan for either of these guys because they kind of I don't personally feel as if they gained any value from when they were drafted. I mean, Igbuka had a crazy start to the year and then fell off completely. Ted McMillan was kind of just fine in the Panthers offense. He hit 1,000 yards, but I think I would be willing to re-roll the dice there. And in a lot of superflex leagues, we'll talk about the quarterbacks in a second. In a lot of superflex leagues, I think you would get these guys at the 104, the 105, the 106.
Mhm.
So I think there is a lot of room for some value gain if people are valuing last year's rookies in this range of the 102 and the 103.
Well, let's drop it down a tier. And I will say, for me personally, whenever I start really diving into these guys and have a much better feel, knowing myself, if the QBs do go 1 and 2 overall, I'll probably rank him ahead of like Mekhi Lemon, the wide receiver 3. But of course, we'll see what landing spots are. We'll see what projected draft capital is. But I mean, I was the idiot that had Cam Ward ranked as like his QB 15 in Dynasty coming into this past year to watch Cam Ward faceplant. But anyway, besides the point, looking at him, is he more so a slot type wide receiver? Because typically, from what I see with these guys that profile to be in the slot, is the production looks really good in college. However, they don't have the projected draft capital, which is exactly what I'm seeing if I go and look at like NFL mock draft database. If I go ahead and look at like the Domain Bakery, right? They have him as the wide receiver 2 in this class. Land has him as the wide receiver 3, however. So typically what I see with those like wide receivers, Amon-Ra St. Brown's the best example, is like, hey, the guys that are going to be better fantasy assets than NFL pieces are going to go later in the draft because they profile to be more so that inside wide receiver that just moves the chains.
Yeah, you are absolutely spot on there. The only reason why he's not in a tier with Carnell Tate and Jordan Tyson for myself is because of the projected draft capital. This is just not the profile of a guy who goes in the top 5, top 10, whereas I could definitely see that case with Jordan Tyson or Carnell Tate. I mean, production wise, talent wise, I think he's as good as those guys, but and maybe that's a oversight on my part because somebody like Amon-Ra St. Brown who has that slot profile is as good for fantasy as any 6'2", 6'3" wide receiver.
Yeah.
But he won the Bolitnikoff in 2020. He won the Bolitnikoff in 2025 for the best wide receiver in college football. He will operate primarily out of the slot, like you said. 70% of his snaps in 2025 were out of the slot. I think he has the talent to be a top 20 pick. He probably goes in that 10 to 25 range. But I mean, he's nuts. No one could guard him one-on-one in college. He's also a huge yards after catch threat, great athlete. And like I said, he's a tier below those guys only because I don't think he has that potential to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. But Mason, the later capital does sometimes mean he ends up in a better situation.
Yeah.
Would I rather have the wide receiver that gets drafted to the Browns or the guy that goes to the Rams? Right? It's that kind of conversation that I think we'll be having with Mekhi Lemon.
Well, perfect. Well, let's dive into the quarterbacks. I know that Fernando Mendoza has some pretty good interviews. Seems like he's got some energy. But outside of that, are any of these guys going to run like Mendoza or Dante Moore at the NFL level?
I don't think they will.
Okay.
Fernando Mendoza is the strong favorite right now to be the first overall pick in this year's draft. This guy's got great size. He's 6'5", 225, won the Heisman, obviously. But this is the thing for me. What I find important is that there isn't really any rushing floor here whatsoever. He can like move around a little bit, but he's like Jared Goff. He's not going to give us any sort of floor in terms of the rushing production. He's got all the arm talent in the world. He can make all of the throws. I was still high on Caleb Williams, even though he wasn't this insane, huge rushing threat. This is like Fernando Mendoza is not that type of first overall pick. He's not a Trevor Lawrence. He's not a Caleb Williams. The Raiders have the 101. It seems like he probably will go there. They will have a new head coach. They have Brock Bowers. The offensive line is bad. I don't love the situation. So him at 5 is merely me sort of taking a shot that his ceiling is going to be like a guy who you are streaming week to week. Maybe he has a year with 35 passing touchdowns, but it's that kind of Jared Goff type where you're never excited about it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, like, you actually have what Matthew Stafford leading the league in terms of MVP odds for the majority of the season, and he's good in fantasy, but it's not like he's just an absolute game breaker. What situation would you rather have? Would you rather have the quarterback going to the Raiders or the Jets?
Honestly, this is going to be an unpopular take, but I would rather have the Jets. The offensive line is built out. It's really, really good. The weapons are almost equal. Like if they lose Brees Hall, okay, they're worse at running back. But Garrett Wilson is an elite alpha wide receiver. Like I said, the offensive line. So Dante Moore, the question with him is if he's going to declare. And if he does declare, it's probably because he's gotten some feedback that he could go second overall. The Jets have that pick, like you're talking about. I would rather go to the Jets. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of depends who the Raiders hire because they just fired Pete Carroll.
Pete
So,
Carroll. Yeah.
I mean, you at least have Bowers. You got something. You got Bowers and Genty at least.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
if neither guy is going to run and their ceiling is Goff, Stafford, will they at least run as much as Burrow? Because Burrow will get you 300 rushing yards in a season.
I think they can. Dante Moore
Okay.
definitely has more of that escapability to him. He
Mhm.
kind of does more stuff out of structure than Fernando Mendoza does. The problem with Dante Moore, he's so young. He's a 1 year starter. He's going to be 20 on draft night. So he started for 1 year at Oregon. But if he gets feedback from the NFL that he's going to be a top 5 pick, I think it would be hard for him to turn that away. Neither of these guys are going to give you anything consistent in terms of rushing at the NFL level. Joe Burrow, sure, 300 yards. It's not difference making. And that's sort of why, I mean, Zach comped Dante Moore to CJ Stroud. So it's sort of what you see is what you get in terms of the rushing department. And that's just not something that I am super excited about. And that's why I have them at 5 and 6 compared to putting them at 2 and 3 if they go with the first 2 picks in the NFL draft.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. Let's move over to Jonah Coleman and just taking like a peek at like the bakery as an example in terms of how far down he drops in tiers as a prospect to Jeremiah Love. Is he still in the striking range of going round one of the NFL draft?
I do not think so.
Okay.
What I hear most about Jonah Coleman is that he's probably a day 2 pick, so he'll be taken in the second or third round. Maybe could crack the top 50, but that's not guaranteed whatsoever. He's projected as the RB2 in this class, but there's a lot of fluctuating opinions on that. I know that Zach views him kind of similarly to all of the other guys. Like he doesn't think that he's all that special, worthy of being a second round pick. The bakery does like him quite a bit. He's similar build to Ashton Genty actually. He's 5'9", 228. So he's super solid, low center of gravity, stocky guy. Um, he's just a really solid running back. Doesn't do anything incredibly special, but he has the 3 down skill set. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. Really good after contact, similar to how Ashton Genty was, not to the same level whatsoever, but 4 yards after contact per attempt this past season. Uh, Ball security is great, doesn't really fumble at all, and he has the flashy plays as well, which I really like. He loves a stiff arm, he loves a hurdle. And one thing that is going to bring his stock down a little bit is that he didn't really have a good 2025, but the Washington offense was kind of just terrible as a whole. Whereas in 2024, he did do a lot better, and he doesn't really have the long speed. Like, I don't think he's going to be a guy that runs a 4.4. I don't know how much that drops him in the draft. Obviously, we saw a guy like Scatabo last year who was this really good prospect, but his combine didn't go well, and then he drops in the draft. So I think he's probably a day 2 pick, but this is sort of a running back class where there isn't a whole lot going on outside of Jeremiah Love.
Well, that kind of sucks in that case because you look around, there are a lot of good landing spots for running backs this year. Okay, so if we look at the other guys like Boston and then Casey, a name I can't even pronounce. Like, is this tier, C tier, just leaps and bounds lower than the players in B tier and above?
I don't necessarily think it will end up being there. I think that Denzel Boston and Casey Concepcion is what we're going to go with at the moment. Those guys could easily be late first round picks. And in that case, they profile as guys who are worthy of these late firsts in our rookie drafts. Now, starting with Denzel Boston, big body X wide receiver, 6'4, 210 pounds. He has all the classic traits of that big X, really fast, strong hands, only 2 drops in 2025. Doesn't really give you much after the catch, but he's a great red zone threat. 20 touchdowns in the last 2 seasons. I think I really like Denzel Boston. I think it depends on where he lands. I could see a guy like Sean Payton loving Denzel Boston, being that sort of Cortland Sutton replacement as he gets older. He projects as a late first round pick. And the Washington offense used him very creatively. It kind of reminded me of how the Falcons used Drake London, moving him around the formation, those quick slants, those outs, that type of stuff. And Casey Concepcion, sort of the exact opposite. He's a lot smaller, 5'9, 5'11, sorry, 190. But he has exactly what you need to have if you're going to be that smaller player. In super dynamic athlete, very, very good separator, super quick feet, great before and after the catch in terms of that quickness. And he's an explosive play machine at Texas A&M. 26 catches of 15 plus yards in 2025. Great after the catch ability as well. Dropped the ball a little more than you would like, but this is the kind of player who has a wide range of outcomes of how he's used in the NFL. I've heard some people talk about him having like a Debo kind of role. He obviously doesn't have the girth for that, for the lack of a better word, but I think he's probably used more out of the slot in the NFL. But both these guys, Concepcion and Boston, are probably late first round picks, and I think that they could have a lot of impact at the NFL level depending on where they end up.
But I mean, just taking like a peek at NFL mock draft database, looking at the domain bakery, looking at the land draft guide, it seems like across the board, it's almost a consensus that after the top six guys or so, there's a teardrop. And like you said, I'm sure this is going to change. Obviously, I don't know nearly enough to be coming out here and trying to set anything in stone. But it seems like if I were to have the 106 or higher, I'd be pretty damn excited this year.
I think you absolutely should be. And you're right, there is a significant teardrop. And I think it's going to be one of those things where some of these guys will make themselves more known as we get closer to draft time. There's always those players that sneak up through February, March, and April. And right now, I think the top six feels really solid. You feel really good about a pick before the 106 if you have it right now. And if you have the 107 or later, you're kind of hoping that one of these guys stands out through the draft process.
Yeah, well, let's kind of, in that case, I don't want to say rapid fire, but let's go through the next few tiers a little bit quicker if we think that this is where things start to be a little more fluid and are going to change during the draft process. So, give me a rundown with these guys in D tier, like Kenyon Sadiq, Elijah Surratt, and Jadarian Price.
Yeah, so Kenyon Sadiq is going to be the top tight end in this class, most likely. He's great all around. He's got good size as well. He's an elite athlete, and I think that's what's going to get him into the first round. But he didn't really do much in terms of production whatsoever. And that's a big question with him because people see this elite athlete at Oregon in a good offense, and they're like, okay, why didn't he do more? Why didn't he put up more yards? Why wasn't he a bigger part of this passing offense? And so, like, I genuinely think this guy could be like a 95th plus percentile of an athlete at the tight end position, and that sneaks him into round one. I don't know if you remember, it was when OJ Howard came out, it was a
I love
similar
Billy
thing.
Howard. Yeah,
He was an insane athlete, but he didn't really do much. The Bucks get him at 19, I think it was in that year, and he just kind of never did anything.
yeah.
So I don't think they're similar players, but it's a similar sort of conversation with him where he's the elite athlete, hasn't really done much at the college level. Elijah Surratt, this is Zach's favorite. Well, not his favorite wide receiver, but this is a my guy from
Yeah.
Zach over at Land this year. He's a self-proclaimed Waffle House, always open. Strictly business type of wide receiver. He gets opened, good in contested catch situations. He's got a low drop rate. Isn't a plus athlete or anything like that. He doesn't offer much after the catch. He might sneak into the first round. He's probably a second round pick. Um, but I could see his floor uh, really being appealing to a team and somebody taking him in the late first because of that. He offers his ceiling would be like sort of what Keenan Allen offers a team at this point in his career, kind of thing.
I mean, Zach must love him because he has the ceiling as Michael Thomas.
Yeah, that's what he's been saying. I think it's very hefty. I think that Zach likes to call his shots, and he's been right before. And so yeah, we'll see how the draft process goes for Elijah Surratt.
Well, awesome. What about the last guy in this tier?
Yeah, Jadarian Price, he sort of fell victim to being Jeremiah Love's backup at Notre Dame. If I was Jadarian Price last year, I would have transferred because this guy is really, really good. He just didn't get that much opportunity to show it, and the total numbers won't jump out because he just didn't play as much as the other guy. But he's got crazy straight line speed. He was a sprinter in high school. He's good after contact. He's also insane in the return game. So that's not huge for fantasy, but I think it might prop him up in the NFL draft because he was just nuts as a returner and he would be really, really good with the NFL's new rules. So I think Jadarian Price could be a third round pick. Maybe he sneaks onto day two because of the return ability. This guy's going to be more of a guy that scouts like people who are watching film as opposed to the analytics guys just because he didn't play that much.
Yeah, I mean, at running back, big thing that I always look at is essentially just like four boxes. One, do you have draft capital? Two, are you pretty athletic? Three, do you have the size to be a three down running back? And four, are you going to be able to catch the ball out of the backfield? Like, out of those boxes, what do you think he will check versus not? Like, I don't really care about your production in college at running back, to be honest.
Yeah, the main thing he hasn't checked yet is that he hasn't really shown anything as a receiver. Now, when you have the best running back in the country on your team, how much are you going to use the backup as a receiver? I don't know. So it's a tough thing to gauge there, but he has the size. I think that he will sneak on to day two, and we know that the hit rates of second and third round running backs are pretty good. Uh, and he is a good athlete, and I think that he will perform at the combine. So it's just the receiving role that he's missing there, in my opinion. But he could absolutely have it, and we just didn't get a chance to see it because of Jeremiah Love.
Awesome. Well, let's move it down to the next tier. And here you're starting to throw more players in these tiers. I'm assuming the value becomes a lot flatter.
Especially at this point in the process. I mean, it's January 5th when we're recording this. We have a long, long way to go before finding out more about these guys. This first guy, Justice Haynes, running back out of Michigan, we don't even know if he's in the class yet. He is taking his sweet time deciding if he wants to declare. Michigan isn't even playing anymore, and yet he's still weighing his options for the NFL as well as the transfer portal. He started for the first time in 2025 and he got hurt, so he only played 7 games. It's a really small sample size with Justice Haynes, but a lot of guys really like him. The Bakery really, really likes him. I believe they have him in a tier with Jonah Coleman. He sort of has that one cut and then straight line speed. Big play machine. He had 11 carries for 15 plus yards this year in only 7 games, which at the college level is very, very impressive. There just wasn't really many guys who could catch him at the college level. We'll see how that translates to the NFL. This is another guy that could sneak on to the third round of the NFL draft.
Yeah, looking at it, Land actually has him in their draft guide on the site as the running back too. They have his comparable ceiling to a faster Blake Corum. But so the main thing is he's just not going to catch the ball though.
He didn't show very much of it uh, in that small sample size.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean he can't. This is the thing. This is where I get worried because in these tiny, tiny samples, it's hard to sort of extrapolate and say he can or he can't do something at the NFL level. The reality is, in these 7 games that he started in 2025, he did not show that he's going
Yeah.
to be a large receiving threat.
Which, in my opinion, it's like, hey, at the college level, if you were going to be great at it, they'd probably use you at it.
Most likely, yeah, absolutely.
Well, what about the next guy?
Jeremy Bernard, wide receiver out of Alabama. He is similar to Elijah Surratt in the sense that I think his floor is pretty high. Catches absolutely everything, but he's not a plus athlete. He's the type of guy he's going to find those soft spots in the zone defense. Uh, Honestly, this class sort of falls off pretty fast here at the end of the first round, at least how we're seeing it this far out. And so, me, I'm sort of vying for the safe floors, the guys who I think have an opportunity to at least play in their first year in the NFL, gain some dynasty value, as opposed to taking these crazy upside shots. And Jeremy Bernard is one of those guys. He's probably drafted in the second or third round. I think he could be a really solid number two option for a team for a very long time. I think like a Jacoby Myers is in the range of outcomes for a guy like Jeremy Bernard.
All right. Well, now that we're in the second round, let me just like get a basis of what the second round looked like last year. And you can tell me how you think that the players in this tier would have fit in. Like, we had just random dynasty rookie draft that was in last year in one of my leagues. Caleb Johnson, Luther Burden, RJ Harvey, Jaden Higgins, Kyle Williams, Trey Harris, Scadaboo, Milrow, Jalen Knoll, Jack Besh, Dylan Sampson, Terrence Ferguson. Like, would you say that these second round guys are comparable to last year's class, or would you say this is a better or worse class?
I think the wide receiver class is probably pretty comparable. I think you have your, maybe you don't have your Luther Burden because that was a specific case, but your Trey Harris, your Jaden Higgins, your Jack Besh, those guys are all sort of here. Uh, the running backs is where it's just not there. I think that the fact that last year's running back class was so good and so deep pushed a lot of really good players down the board.
Yeah.
A guy like Jonah Coleman probably doesn't get on to day two last year. A guy like Justice Haynes maybe doesn't get into the second or the third round last year like he will this year. So I think that's where you're going to see a discrepancy. But I think that, I mean, Trey Harris, Jaden Higgins, Jack Besh, those guys were second round picks and didn't do anything as
Yeah.
rookies. So I think that those those comps are definitely in this class. It's just the running backs where it's going to be a lot worse.
Awesome. Well, let's keep running through the second round.
Next up, we have Omar Cooper Jr., wide receiver out of Indiana, Elijah Surratt's teammate. He was the wide receiver 2 for Fernando Mendoza as well. Big year for Indiana. Omar Cooper Jr. is a really good athlete. He didn't produce like crazy, only 850 yards, but 12 touchdowns in 2025. He kind of just does everything well. And again, he's one of these high floor guys, similar to Jeremy Bernard, like I just mentioned, that I would be betting on if this is how the class turns out. And beginning of the second round here, you're not. I don't want to take those insane, huge upside swings. Maybe like we'll talk about with some guys later on. But yeah, Omar Cooper Jr. super solid wide receiver, second round pick probably. And yeah, and then next guy is Katron Allen, running back out of Penn State. There are two Penn State running backs in this draft class. I prefer Allen to the other guy, Nicholas Singleton. But back-to-back years for Allen with 200 carries for over 1,000 yards. He had 1,300 yards in 2025. Really big body. He's 220 pounds, 5'11", great contact balance. I think he's got a really high floor. He's the kind of guy, he's always turning 2-yard carries into 4-yard carries into 8. He's not really a home run hitter. He's not a crazy athlete. Like I know that you mentioned that's one of the things that you like. He also doesn't offer much as a receiver. But I think he kind of comps well to David Montgomery. He can absolutely be a starter on an NFL team, and at worst, he's going to have a long career being in a committee. Last guy left in the E tier is Chris Bell, wide receiver out of Louisville. Chris Bell, insane athlete. He's super big, 6'2", 220. He just tore his ACL. That's the biggest problem with Chris Bell. He was also very gadgety in college. Think Malachi Corley, but a little bit better. And so there's going to be a lot of questions about his medicals. Moving into the F tier.
Wait. You're telling me we get to draft Malachi Corley with the torn ACL?
He was used like Malachi Corley. He's a lot better than Malachi Corley. I can promise you that.
This is the meme of the guy slamming his like credit card on the table, you know?
Yeah.
Well, let's rapid fire the last tier.
Yeah. F tier, starting with Ty Simpson, quarterback out of Alabama. There's no guarantee he's in the class, but if he is, he's probably a second or a third round pick. He gets drafted and sits behind somebody. Emmett Johnson out of Nebraska, smaller guy. Maybe he sneaks onto day 2. I imagine he's like a 4th or a 5th round pick. Jacoby Lane, wide receiver out of USC. He's this year's Keon Coleman. If you look up Jacoby Lane's 5 best plays on YouTube, you're going to think he's the 101. But he's so inconsistent. He doesn't really separate, and he's kind of just there to go up and get the contested catch, the one-hander, that kind of stuff. Next up, LJ Martin, running back out of BYU. I like LJ Martin because he offers a little something different in this class. He's huge, 6'2", 220. He's really imposing in the backfield. Really good year. Another running back that could sneak onto day two. We'll have to see how the draft process goes for him. Next up, Chris Brazzell out of Tennessee. Another Tennessee wide receiver. People will be giving the Jalen Hyatt comp in terms of how he was used in that sort of gimmicky offense. I think he's a little bit better than that. He's also 6'5", 200 pounds, big X deep threat wide receiver. People see him as potentially a second or third round pick. Then we have Skylar Bell, wide receiver out of UConn. Really, really productive year for Skylar Bell, and that's sort of just because he was the only good player on this UConn offense. They gave him absolutely everything. He ends up with 1,280 yards, 13 touchdowns. A lot of that was manufactured. Who knows how well that translates? And to round us out, Eli Stowers, tight end out of Vanderbilt. I didn't know where to rank Stowers just because this Vanderbilt offense was just really weird with Diego Pavia. He's a true receiving tight end. He's going to line up in the slot as opposed to in line. 62 receptions for 800 yards in 2025. His dominator ratings in the bakery are very, very good. But again, you would need a team that really buys into how they would use him at the NFL level, and I'm not sure if you're going to get that. So he rounds us out this top 24.
All right. Well, I appreciate you, my guy. Let me plug just real quick, flockfantasy.com. Want rookie databases, rookie draft guides, rookie rankings, link your Dynasty League, Dynasty Trade Calculator, anything you want, flockfantasy.com. What do you got to plug, my friend?
Yeah, I'm doing some Dynasty content over on the Sammy Stacks YouTube channel, and as well as I started a podcast, the Dynasty Arsenal, talking all stuff. If you want to hear more in depth about these rookies, you can head over there to hear all about that as well.
I'll link both in the description. Appreciate you coming on. And lastly, if you want to get in contact with Sammy, all I got to do is email support@flockfantasy.com.
Hit me up with all your problems, guys. I love solving problems.
Awesome. Appreciate you, my friend.
Thanks, Mason.